Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. Today is Vlogmas Day 22, so we're almost at Christmas now. Obviously I'm going to be doing these vlogs up until Christmas, and then I'm going to take a break. And I don't know, I'm hoping I'll start doing more vlogs next year, we'll see. Definitely not daily. This has been a challenge. That's the reason why Vlogmas is considered a challenge, and it is. I don't know how daily vloggers do it. I mean, I suppose that those people who are daily vloggers do it because it's their livelihood and it's their income, but yeah, it's been a challenge. You can see by how late I upload every day. Anyhow, so today I thought I would go over a little bit about this being the second Christmas now without my husband, and just kind of like how life is now. It's been almost 2 years. He passed away on January 31st of 2016, so it's very close to 2 years since we lost him. And you know, it's interesting. A lot of people will tell you, you know, what you're going to experience and how you're going to go through it and everything. And I've talked to lots of people online who themselves have lost loved ones through various means, not just through suicide like I lost my husband, but just in general. And it's interesting to me how, you know, like some people, their lives seem to completely crumble without their spouses. And I've had a number of people who have gotten angry at me because my life didn't completely crumble. Some people are strong and some people aren't when it comes to dealing with grief and loss and everything else. And you know, and that's the thing, that's one thing that got me, especially in the first year. Obviously within the first few weeks of losing him, I would break down and cry even in front of other people at times. You just can't help it. It's such an overwhelming flood of emotions and grief and just everything else. And you know, I really was very much the grieving widow for the first few weeks, and I tried very hard to rein my emotions in when I was in public, but I couldn't. And I think that's okay. I think that's allowed. But then as time went on, I learned how to kind of manage those emotions, and when I needed to just kind of let it all out, I did it in private at home, usually just with my dogs here and everything else. I didn't have other people around. I would just let it out, I'd let it go, I'd just let the tears flow, and I'd scream and I'd cry, and heck, I even threw some furniture once. I have a big chunk of drywall missing in one corner because I threw a chair because I was so mad. Oh, mad, angry, grieving, just everything. I was just letting everything out. I've only done that once. I was like, okay, let's not completely destroy the house while we're in the process. But time has gone on, and yes, there are still things that will make me think of him and cry. But most of the time, it's happy memories and happy thoughts and things that make me smile and things like that. So, like, the day before winter hit, it was a beautiful, sunny, 62-degree day here in Colorado, and I went to take the dogs to the dog park, and I thought to myself, man, Dave would have really liked this, because it was middle of December, or past the middle of December, and it was warm and sunny and everything, and he hated winter. He did. He really hated winter. So, you know, that was my first thought, is like, gee, Dave would really have liked this day. And he loved going to the dog park with the dogs and playing with the dogs and letting them chase. And one of the things we would do is he would go further out into the park, and the dogs would run to him, and then I would call the dogs, and the dogs would run to me, and then he would call the dogs, and so we basically had the dogs running back and forth between the two of us. And I had, you know, I was remembering things like that on that day, and so it's more of good memories that make me smile these days, rather than, oh my gosh, he's gone, I'll never see him again, breaking down kind of things. Although I did see a video earlier today from Joey Graceffa. He's one of the YouTubers that I have been following like forever, and I've mentioned him before. And he just lost a close friend of his to suicide. And he was just talking about it and bawling his eyes out over it, and it brought back all of those emotions, and so I was crying for the last hour because of that. So I mean, obviously there's more specific triggers nowadays than just, you know, just thinking about him. Most of the time I think of Dave, and it's usually just thinking of happy thoughts, happy memories, and gee, he really would have loved this, or gee, he really would have hated that. And just thoughts in general as life continues to go on and go forward and everything. I mean, he hated the holidays, he hated winter. He really wanted to start snowbirding as soon as we could afford it. And that was one of the things that we were going to have some contention on. Because I love the holidays and I like it to be cold during the holidays. It feels weird when it's too warm. So I'm glad it actually got colder just the day after. So yesterday it turned colder. So the 20th it was kind of nice and warm, and then the 21st, boom, cold and snow and brr. And I'm like, yay, winter. I like winter between Thanksgiving and New Year's. After New Year's, I want summer again. But there's a 5-6 week period where I'm like, okay, yay, winter. And that's my level of tolerance for cold weather. So I'm like, gee, can we have snow and cold and everything that makes the holidays just feel right? Just because, you know, I grew up in Chicago, so I'm used to having cold, snowy winters, and especially cold, snowy holidays. But you know, it gets old after a few weeks. It really does. But when we talked about snowbirding, which we never were able to quite get our act together on that one, but when we talked about it, he wanted to leave like November 1st and come back in mid-May or something. He wanted to be gone like a long period of time, and that would have kept us away from friends and family through the holidays. And I was like, no, let's leave January 1st. So yes, you have to deal with some winter through the holidays, but we can spend the holidays with our friends and family. And then on January 1st or January 2nd or whenever we can get travel to wherever our snowboarding place is and stay there through, you know, through the end of May or something like that. So yeah, it would still be a long enough time. By the time we came back, it would be nice warm weather again and all of that. But so that one, if we had ever achieved our goal of buying another property and having a place to live that was warmer during the winter, we would have. In fact, I think ultimately my compromise was, fine, November 1st, you go. You can even take the dogs or not, or you take one of the dogs and I'll keep the other one, whatever. And then I'll join you January 1st. But that didn't sit well with him because he didn't like to be separated from me. He was adorable and I loved him very much, but he was a little on the clingy side. He really was. And you know, I appreciated that to some degree, but I do have a very much of a me space kind of a thing. And so that's one of the reasons why we ended up getting a bigger house, was so that we could both be home together and still have our space, so that at least so that I could have my space. He knew I was there, he knew he could come in and talk to me anytime he needed to, but when he didn't need to talk to me, I would have a little bit of space and separation. And so that worked really well for us. We just kept being a little bit too close of quarters in his old house. And that's one of the reasons why, I mean, it didn't matter how much remodeling we did on the house, it was still going to be tight and cramped. Especially with the way we had everything laid out, and we would have had to do some major renovation to redo the layout in order to make it work for how we needed it to work between the two of us. And just selling the house and buying a larger house just was the better option for the both of us. And to be perfectly honest, I'm really glad, because that house had a lot of problems with it as well. It really did. It had very leaky windows, and we were slowly but surely replacing them. It had baseboard heat. It had no ducting at all. So there was no air conditioning. There was no central heat, and it would have cost $20,000 or $30,000 to get the ducting in place just so that we could have central heat and air conditioning and all this stuff. And it was, you know, it was just better to just sell the house to someone who, you know, could afford that level of house and didn't mind the lack of ducting and everything, and get a house that had all the things that we needed, including the space. So that's what we did. One thing I've noticed now that it's been almost 2 years, and this started happening maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, but fairly recently, because one of the things I'd noticed last year and then earlier this year was when a fictional character in a TV show or movie or something died. Normally that would have made me cry my eyes out. After losing Dave, all of a sudden it was like, it was a fictional character, and it just didn't move me at all. Even if it was a favorite character of mine that I really loved and I didn't want to see die and everything else, and it just no emotions, nothing. And that's kind of how I knew I was still a little bit broken from my grieving and stuff and everything. And it was only recently, like I said a month or two ago, where I found myself crying over some silly fictional show, and it made me realize afterwards, like, hey, I haven't done that in a long time. And I think I'm slowly but surely healing and things from the grief. I mean, obviously, a part of me is always going to grieve his loss, no matter what. I'm always going to miss him. I'm never not going to be able to, you know, not talk about him in some capacity. Like if I'm in the middle of a conversation and something reminds me of him, he's going to get brought up. It's just the way my mind works, and you know how I go on tangents and everything, and if he comes up as a relevant tangent, I am not going to shut my mouth and not talk about him. So that happens. I mean, heck, there's my other long-term relationship was with this guy that I had actually met on a chat room back in the early to mid 90s. Yeah, early 90s actually. 92 I think is when we first met, and everything. But we spent 5 years together. 2 years long distance, because he was in the Netherlands and then he was in California working on his master's thesis at HP Labs. And then he ended up getting his job here in Colorado, and that's actually why I moved to Colorado. So, because he worked for HP. And I graduated and I spent a year teaching in Chicago, and then we decided we should move in together, and he was like, well, I'm moving to Colorado, you want to join me? And so that's kind of how that happened. That's how I ended up in Colorado in the first place, was because of him. And we spent, so like I said, 2 years long distance, and then we moved in together, and then we were together about 3 years. We actually bought a house together, even though we weren't married, technically. Although we were really skirting the line on common law in Colorado. I found out afterwards that we were pretty much common law. we really were. But we never filed married, filing jointly for our tax returns. But in all other intents and purposes, we kind of were. But since it was a common law thing, once we split our finances and moved out, and I moved out. It was his house. It really wasn't mine. He put all the money into it, so I wasn't about to try and grab things. And like I said, I didn't realize that we were even common law at the time. It wasn't until afterwards that I realized that. So I wasn't going to try and take half the house, or I mean, I'm not that kind of a person. The breakup really wasn't anything where he did anything wrong or I did anything wrong. It was more of we had grown apart. He ended up spending a lot of his time on the weekends rock climbing and hiking and camping with his friends, and I didn't do any of those things. I hate camping. He took me 4 times. I hated every single one of them. So you can't say I didn't try. I tried. I really, really tried. And I was miserable every single time. Hated it. So, I'm not a camper. I'm just not a camper. Hiking is okay to a degree, but if it's too far uphill, then my congenital heart issue becomes a problem, so I've got to be careful of that, and just all sorts of problems. So we just weren't ultimately compatible, and so we just kind of sat down one evening and like, what are we doing? You know, we're kind of like good friends and roommates. We weren't really even a couple anymore. I barely saw him because he was out doing the things he loved to do, and I was busy with work and school and everything else. I was in grad school at the time, and it was like, come on, what are we doing? We really shouldn't stay together. And so we agreed to split up, and I found an apartment that weekend, thankfully, and life moved on. Life moved on. Same thing with my husband. I mean, life continues. Thankfully, I don't suffer from clinical depression. I've mentioned this before, as I don't have it. I went through the grieving depression last year and part of this year. That's perfectly normal. Everyone will have to deal with that at some point in their lives. But I don't have clinical depression, where I have been through therapy once, and just sitting down and talking to somebody and talking through things did help. And it was determined that I really didn't need any kind of medication. I wasn't to the point where medication would have done me much good. It was like more of just kind of working through, talking through things, and realizing, and the reason why I was having an episode where I needed therapy was I hadn't allowed myself to grieve when my grandmother passed away. And that instead of grieving, instead of allowing myself to cry and miss her and everything else, I just buried myself in school and work, to the point where I would stay at work till 2 and 4 in the morning. I mean, literally, I would not go home, which was a very unhealthy habit of mine. But I would stay and work and just keep working and just go to classes when I had to go to classes and everything, and I would just avoid being home. I would avoid just all sorts of stuff. And the therapist is the one that helped me realize that, yeah, you never grieve for your grandmother. You kind of need to go through that. You need to let yourself do that. And after taking some time and actually just allowing myself to go through the grieving process, and then she suggested I get a pet of some kind, and I ended up getting my cats. Or I got Maxie, the one cat that I have, he's 16 now, and so I've had him. It was 16 years ago that I was wrapping up therapy and got the cat, and it helped. It helped having him around that I could talk to and play with and cuddle with at night and everything else, and so that was a good thing for me. And now I've got the dogs. I still have Maxie, and it helps. It helps. Like if I need a hug, I just go grab a dog, and they're like, "Mom." My dogs are not huge fans of hugs, but they tolerate them for a few minutes from me. I think they realize that I need them sometimes. But yeah, I think things are getting better. I think I'm definitely healing slowly from all the grief and everything. And life continues to move forward. So, alright. Thank you so much for listening to all that. I hope that you got something out of it, maybe. I hope, at the very least, know that if you lose someone you love, let yourself grieve. That's the message, I think, is it helps. It really does help to get it out and to eventually for you to heal. So, alright, until tomorrow, take care. Bye-bye.